Welcome to the ESRAG Podcast, the ultimate hub for everything related to the environment and sustainability Rotary Action Group. I'm your host, Admiral, and alongside me is my brilliant co-host, Felix Kuriyaki. We're here to bring you a blend of innovative solutions, inspiring stories, national insights from Rotarians, Rotaractors, and experts who are passionate about saving our planet as we are. Of course, each episode we dive into hot topics like climate change, renewable energy, biodiversity, and everything else. And all the community-driven environmental initiatives that make you say, wow, these people are awesome. Whether you're a seasoned eco-warrior or just dipping your toes in the sustainability pool, we have something for you here. So get ready for some serious eco talk with a sprinkle of humor, because saving the world doesn't have to be all doom and gloom. So welcome to ESRAG Podcast, and here's my co-host, Felix.
Greetings, everybody. It's been a while since we last had a session with everybody. I'm looking forward to the session today, especially with the guest that we have, Deniz Vural. She's quite amazing. Her resume speaks volumes and volumes and volumes and volumes. And I will try as much as possible to get as much as possible from her, because you do need to hear what she has to say. So welcome and enjoy the ride.
Today, our guest is Deniz Vural, has a marine engineering degree. She's very passionate about climate and permafrost. She has done geological engineering. And we're going to talk about her Taskforce, her inability to stop doing things, and her passion to do as many things as possible in ESRAG. But before we get to it, did you read anything interesting in regards to climate? Have you seen something in general?
Yes, it's been quite interesting for the last 2 weeks. I was being visited by Angela Tenbrock, the mayor of Marineland, and also had a guest from the University of Wild College, the president herself, and that's Dr. Victoria, with her husband. So we had an opportunity to be able to visit what we call the oldest remains of humans found on Earth, dating back to 2.8 million years ago. We have one of the oldest remains, popularly known as the Turkana boy. The remains were found at a location in Kenya called Turkana. The original remains are guarded by the National Museum of Kenya. And it was interesting to see in the history of it how man had to adapt to the environment just to make it. And even as we talk about climate change, it made me reflect on where we are and how much we are pretty much playing around with the environment, or taking the risk of not taking care of the environment, and how much we ourselves can become a replica of what we call the last remains of human beings. So it was quite interesting to walk through that history, look at that journey, and also be conscious of, do we want ourselves to be called the last remains of human beings? So it's a critical subject. There's a lot of weight to it, and everybody has to play a role in it. And so tonight's guest definitely will dig deeper into it.
Is it like a special location, or is it in a museum? How they were found? They were found a long time ago. Were they found by the great British archaeologists, as everything in the world?
The remains said to have been found by a team led by Dr. Leakey. And this is in the area of Turkana, which is a northern part of Kenya, close to Lake Turkana. So basically, dates back to the remains were found, I think, sometime either in the 40s. I'm yet to confirm on that. It was quite a ride. And then also other remains were found as early as 1985. So it shows that there's much more to be discovered in terms of how the environment overtook them, and they had to adapt in order to be able to continue living and existing. You can be able to access the remains through the National Museum of Kenya. We do have a replica of it, and also we do have the original. The remains are kept and guarded with the National Museum. So it is accessible. It's just an issue of making arrangements with the museum, and you're able to kind of have an observation. And also they'll walk you through the entire history as all the pieces are being put together.
How did it make you feel standing by something that is 2.5 million years old?
It was surreal, to be honest, because these were actual bones. This basically was not maybe a piece of metal put together, or maybe a form of plastic molded on it.
Imagine 2.5 million plastic years old.
That's quite interesting, talking about plastics, because back then there wasn't any plastic, that's for sure.
Are you sure 200 million years old there was no plastic?
I'm confident of that one. Plastics just came the other day. what we're doing is, I hope we don't have a replica of plastics, future generations are looking at and saying, this is what they used to use, plastics for this, plastics for that. So we need to take care of our environment as much as possible. It was quite interesting to see the actual bones and also being taken through the science of how the dating was being done. It's something you want to yourself experience. There's no doubt about it. And if you do have a chance, I do welcome you to Kenya and also to Lake Turkana, because they do have a monument to pretty much symbolize where the remains were found. And also there's an island where the latest remains were found called Rusinga Island, which is in Lake Victoria, the second largest freshwater lake in the world. It's interesting that we are still discovering humanity from past millions and millions of years ago. I think we need to learn, basically, from that history so that we ourselves are conscious of our current situation, the risk we run into becoming replicas, or rather generations, later on, basically hoping they'll still be human beings, looking and saying, this is how this species used to exist.
I would just add on to that. Of course, I totally agree with Felix. Lake Turkana is one of the most largest Africa saline lakes. It's a really good lake to preserve pristine as bones, because it's one of the largest saline bone lakes in Africa. And therefore, there has been many things that have been found there by archaeologists. And it's also a UNESCO heritage site because of its history and what it means for the region. If you are going to Kenya, I think Lake Turkana is a place to visit, together with Felix, of course.
Yes, I'd be happy to guide you. I'll be available. So make sure you let me know. I'll be happy to take the journey with you.
Yeah, if you are really passionate about fossils, I think you will really like Lake Turkana. It's one of the biggest lake what people found. They have found many fossils in the lake.
This is a funny fact about it also. Lake Turkana, from an aerial perspective, changes colors depending on the time of the day. So they have a name for it. It's called the jaded lake because of the way it keeps changing its colors. So I don't know if it has anything to do with more remains we need to discover under the lake. I have no idea. But all through the day, it keeps changing its colors.
That's amazing, just to see it throughout the day. I think our guest will check the tickets when she can come to Kenya already after her coming expedition. From something very interesting to something kind of unthinkable some while ago, we're highlighting the groundbreaking wildfire management strategy in Alaska that is tackling climate change head on. So there has been elite firefighters known as the smoke jumpers are being deployed in Alaska's permafrost. They've been parachuted in a place in Alaska and have 72 hours to contain the fire. So imagine the smoke jumpers are parachuting now into remote areas like Yukon Flats National Wildlife Refuge. So they have 72 hours where they have to contain the fire. Supported by water scoopers, and imagine you being just sent into remote location like Alaska, that's already remote, and you have limited supplies, and you have to contain a fire the size of France, and you have 72 hours to do this. These are the most elite firefighters of the United States, so they've been all deployed in a lot of wildfires around the world, and now they've been deployed in their own home nation. So I think it's very important highlighting, while the world is facing various cataclysms around the world, how some things are really near home for some people.
That's very interesting. Just to mention a bit on that one, there's an ESRAG member who has been talking about if you repurpose the use of coal, it keeps the soil moisture and prevents wildfires. I am yet to see that happening, but it would be interesting to see the science behind it and its application also.
At some point, we need to have really innovative ways of containing the wildfires. There was a very simple research done that if you have a good forest management with burning the forest bit by bit, that will maintain the life of the forest, because forests burn anyway, naturally, even without human activity, let's say. So I think it's important to sometimes back to the basics and review what worked before. We don't have to make sometimes innovative solutions for problems. We have already existing solutions. We just need to implement them on a wild scale. This, of course, returns into having financing and funding and capacity. But maybe our guest Deniz can do that also at the same time. And now it's time for our guest of the day. Our guest today is Deniz Vural. Deniz has been captivated by frozen, pristine environments since childhood, making the poles her primary focus. After earning a bachelor's degree in marine engineering and an internship as an engine cadet, she delved into polar code requirements for ships, which sparked her awareness of the Arctic vulnerability to climate change. Driven by a desire to be part of climate solution, Denise transitioned in geological engineering for her master's, blending her passion for engineering and environmental protection. Her master research centered on permafrost, particularly on thermokarst lakes and permafrost carbon feedback cycle. If you don't understand these words, she will explain to you what it means. Now, as researchers at Polar Research Institute, PRI, within Turkey's TÜBİTAK, Denise contributed to projects under H2020 Green Deal, focusing on climate change and impact on polar regions, and enhancing public awareness through education and outreach. Beyond her professional work, Denise actively engages in an NGO dedicated to marine environmental conservation. Rotary member since 2009, serves on the board of Environmental Sustainability Rotary Action Group, ESRAG, leading initiatives to promote environmental stewardship and sustainable living globally. Welcome, Deniz.
Thank you for having me today.
How are you today?
Pretty great. The sun is shining, so we have a warmer weekend after a very rainy past week. So yeah, Berlin is shining right now.
And you, of course, already know Felix.
Of course. He's one of our board of directors.
Also.
Who is doing a great job. Let's not forget about it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Let's dive right in. Deniz, can you tell us a bit about your background and what inspired you to dedicate your life to environmental conservation?
That is a very good question. I guess I would have a very long answer for that, but I will try my best. So, first of all, when I started to dream about my future job, let's go back to middle school, high school. I was always wanted to be related to something including art because that was free time activity that I was always going to play with art. But somehow what we were doing is always something about environment, right? We were drawing forests or drawing something about nature. So in addition to where I grew up next to nature, I was also trying to paint nature. So I'm not a good painter, but I think I am taking a good photos of nature. So that comes after when I realized that, okay, maybe my hand is not that talented, but I think photography works. And once I also started high school, I had a chance to engage with different groups, let's say the social groups.
Into more photography, or is it more into arts?
I will come to that point. There are a combination of two things, actually. First, of course, the nature. We are talking about animals and everything, the whole ecosystem in front of you. And you, as a small kid, try to discover what is what and what's going out of, I don't know, the big world that you are just witnessing with your small eyes. But also, I had my first photography machine when I was in actually university. But beforehand, there was cameras of the phones, and I was always trying to observe some interesting things. Together with this, I would also say that I was a lucky child that grew up with animals. So I think they helped me to get to know different creatures and respect to their living corners. As I started to high school, it was more interesting to get to know the people's values or people's knowledge or just feelings about different things. We can include this as a, I don't know, theater club, or we can also add this as a club where we get together to discuss, okay, what will be the next donation to where and how we can increase our efforts for this campaign to help, I don't know, the other students' donations or something else. So I would say this was the very first time I get into the teamwork as a like community work for something. But for environment, that kind of made my path in a very later in the future once I started my undergraduate studies. Normally, I was the person who wanted to go for aerospace engineering, but then we have a different system. I am original from Türkiye. And in Türkiye, we have a system. Maybe in some of the countries, we have a similar system as well, but you sit for an exam, right? And my grades or my points I could grab from at the end of the exam was eligible for maritime or marine engineering. So this is still something high, but compared to aerospace engineering, where I wanted to go, it was a bit less and I could afford that. That was my ticket to Istanbul Technical University, where I started marine engineering. And there was the club. So my teacher, one of my teachers was leading a club called Polar Research Center, and they was seeking for a student who could lead the club for something that increased their outreach capacities. And that was the time, for the first time, I was getting into, okay, how we can learn more about environment, especially polar regions, and make a bridge between science and society to let people know about the facts of climate change and how we can, as an individual, right, can do something to minimize our impact on climate.
So it wasn't just one day you woke up, I want to preserve environment. It was like daily passion. Like, I can do this as well. I can also try to do this and see what it leads to.
You can try, but back then we didn't have. I'm really happy to see all those activists working on collaboratively how we can do a better world for their generation or like today's world. But I don't know, maybe the environment that I was in was quite all right for me, that I didn't really realize that what's going on. Of course, I was always concerned about climate and what is out there and how we can start a change from ourselves. At least this is what I'm working hard on myself today. But back then, I didn't really realize, because you are always something in between to reach your target. And environment, I have to admit, wasn't my first priority.
Quite interesting to hear the history between aerospace engineer and also jumping into marine. I do have a question for you, just to kind of mention. You still have, you can marry the two between aerospace and marine engineering to kind of take care of the environment, right?
Exactly.
So, which means it's not a lost hope, it's not a lost cause. Now, jumping into the question, you generally began with the Interact and then progressed to Rotaract. How did these experiences shape your perspective on community service and leadership?
So, again, going back to high school years, me and my friend from my childhood, we were actually wanted to do something different. And this was actually volunteering or providing service to people together. And that was the very first time we said, okay, let's build an Interact, or let's establish an Interact club. Back then, and still, his aunt was a Rotary member, and she helped us a lot to get into the process, how we can fund a club and how we can do all the chartering stuff and etc. It wasn't an easy process, but we learned a lot on the way. And afterwards, I have to say, especially in my second year as a president, we had a chance to work with Rotaractors, and it was such a big passion for me, because you, as a high school student, you only know people around you, and the people around us were our friends, right? From school, from our neighborhood. So we invited the people that we knew, and we wanted to create a bigger community where we could also reach out to the others where we know less about them. So later in the process, I would learn that, okay, we as each individual are representing a group of people from the society, and we need to actually meet their needs, right? And that actually connects me very well with the Rotaract, because then, of course, as an interactor, you are going to join the district conference and then etc. But also by a chance, I learned about a Rotaractor campaign in a village that they are building, or they building a big campaign about helping a school, like from ground to a pen, they were trying to collect everything, either as a second hand or, if possible, as a first hand to donate to the school. And as a high school student, I don't know, probably I was 15 years old or something. I was calling to companies, even like from the ones from the industry, to ask about, okay, so we have a school. It is a primary school, and we try to also build their roads, so where they can walk on it, or they can have even, I don't know, field that they can play, or even the road with marbles, right? So I don't know how many calls I made, but that, I think, is a very good example to have such a service project, because for the first time, I mean, I'm not coming from the industry, or I have no profession about it, but I am really dedicated to find something to be able to donate that school. And in the end, we did a huge donation thanks to the people who were convinced by my speech. By that, we had, I don't know the number right now, but for the playground, we were able to donate something around 100 balls for kids. And we also made the connections to provide 10 computers where you have like all set up, as well as the marvels around the school and also for the road. So this was something, a huge success for our club. And I was definitely amazed by how people actually trusted us, meaning that they had no idea about who we are and why we are doing this. But then in the end of the day, they could also put an empathy. Not everybody has the same values or same chances to go from the same way. And people just help to each other together, something big that could make a school for kids. And that school is still there. So I'm talking about a decade ago. So it was 2013, or even no, I'm sorry, it was 2011. Yes, it was 2011. We also visited the school, and when you go back to school, there is one welcoming there, and it is also thanking to the clubs. And there are many names of the Rotaract clubs, and there's only one Interact club there, which was our club. So this was something we were really proud of it. And yeah, I would say that was one of the biggest achievements, that I felt like, okay, we as a community, we need to help each other. And by doing that, by sharing, by even telling something to the other, is part of sharing the same feelings. That is always better than just watching.
Sounds amazing. What was your first experience, Felix? Did you also build a school the first time you joined Rotary?
It's quite interesting. I'm learning a lot from her. And also it's kind of connecting to why she's very bold and why she's very, can I say, passionate towards, because with such an early interaction with masses, with the public, it's easy for you as a young person to build into it, in towards your future, always to go for what you want and make a difference, because you saw that as a child, and it built your skills, your personal skills, to be able to bring around a consensus on a subject. Now, for me personally, after high school, what I used to do, I used to organize the whole neighborhood to do cleanups, like collecting of, waste.
Like Felix, I imagine you already that you were doing. I was like thinking that's probably the first thing you did was like organize the whole community to clean up.
Literally, I did. Literally, yes, I did. Yes, I did. And this was as early as high school. Now, in high school itself, what I used to do, I used to organize the students to kind of chip in. I used to sell snacks. We have snacks called samosas. Samosas, I don't know how to explain this one, but you all need to come to Kenya, so at least you have a good understanding of what a samosa is. But it's a snack that is filled with meat. And being in a Catholic boarding school, you're longing for food from outside. So I used to be able, I had a deal with a restaurant that supplied the snacks. We sell the snacks to the students, raise money to be able to meet the expenses of those who came from less economically families. I think that will date back to one of the first community organizations I used to do. But I've done a lot. I mean, I can talk about it almost all day, but today it's time for Deniz to shine.
After all of that, somehow you decided, okay, I'm doing my master, I'm doing my bachelor, I'm working, I'm internship. How did you join ESRAG? Can you tell us about your role within ESRAG, within the Environmental Sustainability Rotary Action Group, and some key initiatives that you're involved in?
Of course. I mean, when you look at my background, it looks like there are many different topics to deal with, but also they are so interconnected. So I think me as a person, I cannot tackle with one thing at a time. I also enjoy, even for my daily tasks, right? I mean, I start doing something, and for a type of person like me, it's always fruitful to give a break for what you are doing to focus on something else and continue from there.
I'm feeling this as well. I'm like, I can do.
Yeah, I think that's a good diet.
Exactly.
And yeah, we also combine this a lot when maybe by coincidence or chance or you name it. I was involved in different activities, including sport as well. And this was something we were always trying to find a way to connect when we were in Interact Club. I am only naming one project that I just explained, the school project. And that was the time that I was inspired by the impact that we can bring back to the community. Of course, we failed a lot as well, but I gained a lot of great memberships from there. And I wanted to continue with this community. And there I started, or I became a member of Rotaract Club in our district. And from there, as everyone, you just follow one to another committee works or your board. And after I complete my role as a president, I had an invitation from our district to pursue many different, let's say, roles. But one of them was also water and sanitation. And there, actually, we did a lot of groundwork, not only to go to malls, to meet with people and give brochures to explain, okay, why water matters or why sanitation is important, especially where you may have less water or let's say the water that you can drink, so drinkable water. Countries like Turkey, this might be kind of hard to imagine for some people because you always have the resource there, but especially for the countries where you may have no access to clean water, this is obviously an issue. And we wanted, or we tried to picture this for our community because drought is also another issue that Turkey always had this threat from season to season. And sometimes it's a hot topic that it's always part of a debate. So how we can overcome this. So we hold many local conferences together with the local foundations related to trees or related to oceans. So always we try to combine this wider ecosystem because water is part of everything. So I would say this was my first experience into environment. Of course, we are talking about polar regions. We are talking about climate change, where I had the first awakening for myself.
Which year was this? What kind of timeline are we speaking about?
So polar regions, or my first involvement in the topic, goes back to 2015. And then this district work was around 2016 and 17, the term of 2016 and 17. And of course, the more you know about people, the more you connect from polar regions to the oceans, from oceans to the forest to infrastructure. We always try to combine those meetings and make them part of it and always bring people that, okay, so wherever we go, whatever we do, it's part of our lives. And to be honest, I also learned a lot from professors and the experts from the field. And that was also the time I met for the first time with our now immediate past chair, Yaşar Atacı, because he was a district, I think, environment chair, environment committee chair, something like that. So every term, you have governors that they provide different teams. But I think something related to, again, pure environment topics. And we also had a lot of discussions, and now we have a very nice committee working aside. And that was the very first time I got involved in environment topics in Rotary. Through time, of course, this work kind of unofficial way. I'm saying unofficial because I wasn't part of ESRAG back then. I joined the convention in Hamburg in 2019, and that was the first time I met with ESRAG, like in person, the booth. And of course, with the members of ESRAG, it was something like, wow, I want to be part of this organization. And the following year, I involved in different working groups of ESRAG. And one of them was also the Green Event Handbook, where you can also access the soft copy version on ESRAG website. So this is something where people can go check if they want to organize a event or any type of gathering in a sustainable way. So that was a great get together for people from all around the world, for this committee to put something in an efficient way for everybody else's use. And I think that's a very good way, so everybody can use this sort of book to check, okay, I'm doing this, so let's go back and see that. So this is one of the works of the group, but obviously that was my first official step into ESRAG as a community, where I was really thrilled in becoming a member in the following year. And then, the following term, I guess, after one full, very hardworking year, I had an invitation, or I was nominated. And then I had a chance to meet with the following year's chair. And then, of course, you are providing your statement for the community. And again, you are asking to this question to yourself, like, okay, what are my goals for environment that I can make something different or a change good for societies and especially for environment?
That's very fascinating. First of all, it's nice when you go to convention that you can see, okay, how many things Rotary is actually doing around the world. There's many different booths. There's many different initiatives, from saving the bees, literally just the bees, to taking a big issue like the climate and plastic and human trafficking. There's also a really big booth about human trafficking. And so it's always inspiring to see what Rotary is doing in different rags, the Rotary action groups. Yeah, and it's always nice to see how you get into it. But then I think for now, let's just get into what you actually do. And then it's the polar things and permafrost.
I have a question for Deniz, who knows a lot. And basically, she needs to break down a few of that to some of the levels of us who are still learning some of the science behind it. And just a quick one. For our listeners who may not be familiar, could you explain what permafrost is and why it is so crucial to our ecosystem?
So let's make a small pill of permafrost. So this is a layer of rock or soil or sediment that you can imagine. This remains frozen for at least 2 consecutive years. And it is found in very cold regions like Arctic or Antarctic, or in the high mountains like Himalayas or alpine regions. And you can imagine digging into the ground and finding that no matter how deep you go, the soil is frozen, solid, of course. And that is actually permafrost. So it is not just ice, but also includes soil and rocks that are frozen together. So if you have, I don't know, let's say I have a pen, right? And I put this into freezer and I leave it there for 2 years. And there you go. You can get a permafrost. So this is kind of for the idea.
I think a lot of people have in their freezer permafrost then.
Exactly. If you forget something there for more than 2 years, below 0 degrees, you have your own permafrost. I say this often because there is this misunderstanding. People always say that permafrost is melting. No, this is not ice only. So you also have sediment that is thawing. So that's why when it thaws, you lose the water material around it, but you still have another soil or what have you there. And this is important because we are talking about climate regulation, we are talking about infrastructure, and we are talking about ecosystems. And permafrost is sitting in the middle of it. So everything is around the permafrost, especially for the polar regions. And when we talk about, for instance, infrastructure, imagine you have a house right now and you are building it on permafrost. And when permafrost dies or thaws, so you have your pure erosion there. And this is only one point. If we talk about like generally climate change or the global warming, so permafrost begins to thaw, which leads release of greenhouse gases. So this trapped carbon in the permafrost accelerating climate change itself, damage the infrastructure that we just mentioned, and becomes the ground becomes unstable. And not only the buildings, but also roads and other structure, which comes with also the budget. Not only lives, but also if you want to relocate. So this is another story to discuss. And overall, changes in ecosystems. So thawing permafrost can alter habitats, affecting the plants and also animals that live there. So understanding permafrost is important because it's helped us predict, mitigate these impacts on our climate and overall systems. Because when permafrost dies, this is also leading another threat for environment, which is all connected with any other events in our system.
How can I see this? So permafrost is frozen, right? What degree it starts to is because it's on the ground. What kind of temperature are we talking about here? Because it's if we're saying it's permafrost, what kind of temperatures are we talking about here?
It definitely depends on the environment because we are talking about permafrost, which is hidden sometimes at the 100-meter deep or sometimes 1,000. And you need to see the volume there. So when we go back to, for instance, my master's thesis, so I focus on thermokarst lakes. And thermokarst lakes are the lakes that imagine you have a permafrost in the region and the ice-rich permafrost. Let's talk about this. And the ice form here melts. And this helps to form those lakes. And those lakes, of course, once you also, we talk about the greenhouse gas that is soaked in permafrost. Because we are talking about the animals and the ancient life up there. And once everything died, it buries under this soil. And then brings you this pure the fuel and everything you need as a resource. And of course, this has carbon itself. And talking about the greenhouse gases like the first or the second starter, carbon dioxide and methane. And once, for instance, those lakes form, not only the lakes, but overall permafrost thaws, those gases emit to the atmosphere. And you can imagine the atmosphere that we have several gases flying everywhere. And it is actually important for our environment because if we wouldn't have greenhouse gases, the earth probably would be a very cold place that human being couldn't exist. But greenhouse gases help us to make earth an optimum, let's say, brings earth to an optimum temperatures that today's world can exist in this form. But imagine you have more than expected greenhouse gases in the atmosphere that gives you a blanket effect. So let's say we are in the summer right now in the northern hemisphere and it is already warm. And imagine this greenhouse gas is a blanket that you pull over yourself. So how much oxygen you can circulate inside. There is an idiom, for instance, in our culture. So the more, the worse. So everything needs to be a balance because from the beginning of the Earth planet and today, the elements and everything is same. The value never changes because of the equation. But the problem is where they are located. So back then it was stored in the permafrost, but now today it's in the atmosphere. That's why there are different geoengineering ideas or initiatives proposing that, okay, we can actually inject carbon back into the rock, back into the soil. But again, what will be the energy budget of this? So there was one point that Felix was mentioning, and you too, about the climate and what we are doing. So what we need actually is to duplicate the environment, not trying to create something from out of blue. So if we would be able to duplicate environment in a respected way, I'm sure there is no way to make it harder for its recovery, because no matter what, environment or planet will continue to live, but we will be the one who will be under threat.
We and a lot of animals also. So it's kind of need to watch out for other.
All creatures.
No, it is important. I think going from there, I don't know if you know about the climate feedback loop, which starts basically like once it's something, the mid exits permafrost, it increases greenhouse gases, and that will increase permafrost thawing and that climate feedback loop.
Permafrost, carbon feedback loop. Yep.
Yeah. It's very important to kind of delay that as slow as possible, if possible. But I think Felix will like to know more about what you're also doing besides knowing all this information.
There's so much to learn. There's so much to gain. But now, how did the Conservation Glacier Resource Task Force come to be, and what inspired its formation?
I mean, that is, of course, another initiative built during summer camp that I was invited as a speaker to talk about permafrost and climate, actually. So last year during Rotaract camp, summer camp in Switzerland, around August 2023. So I was invited, one of the Rotarians that I met during another conference related to environment, and we exchanged information. And then he approached me asking, like, would you like to come over and talk about permafrost and climate? And I, of course, like really excited, and I have a pure mountain permafrost in front of me. So I had everything I need. And I ended up talking about permafrost, and I met there a very precious and very important scientist who is also named Felix. And he is a glaciologist in the region and also a Rotary member. And we were talking about his efforts, actually, that he also get to know another person through their manuscripts that they publish about how the regional, let's say, glaciers became vulnerable in Switzerland and how they pursue as a solution to make it slower, the process itself, and also to have the combination of these two regions or two different environments to mitigate those glacial, let's say, retreat. That was the time, of course, as a second step in this gathering, I also talked about ESRAG. And he was really interested in, and he was talking about, okay, how we can get a member of ESRAG and how we can pursue more in environment topics in ESRAG. And that actually just shed light in my brain. And I was like, actually, you know what? We don't have something related to glaciers in ESRAG. And why don't we put a proposal for task forces? So that was the very first time the idea came. And I think a month later, we came together and we started to discuss, okay, how we can focus in this, let's say back then, provisional task force. But as of few months, now it's a officially established task force called Glacier Resources Conservation. And this is an initiative by every passionate Rotary member designed to address the urgent issue of glacial melting and its impact on freshwater supplies. Back then, Felix told me that he has a PhD student who is now in India, in the region of Ladakh, and they are actually pushing this project forward. And I told him that since this is a project which is already taking place, or they have experience on that, why don't we take or pick this region as a pilot to circulate or to put our efforts together for, let's say, implement innovative glacial management techniques as well as the advocacy and the data analysis.
Sorry to interrupt. Is that actually the main goal, to kind of maintain glaciers worldwide, to find places where the glaciers still are there?
The idea is to slow down the melting of glaciers, because they also have, for instance, like something cultural but also traditional that is called ice stupa. So this is kind of a shape The listeners can also go check in the web. That is something help the local communities to store water, especially during the month of summer, because then most of the glacier will be gone. And this is the only access to clean water for them because you don't have such infrastructure. And this also helps for the process to make the glacial forms in a, let's say, easier way compared to no ice to pass around. That was the first time we said that, okay, let's circulate our efforts around this, but also let's let people know about why glaciers are important, not only for the regions where people have those, or not because this is the only access to clean water, but also it is part of our ecosystem. And like we are talking about today, why polar regions are so important for our overall ecosystem, so does glaciers. So the group aims to improve this through not only citizen science, but also science communication to increase the awareness about the importance of such environments.
Are there any glaciers in Kenya, Felix?
Yes, we do have some glaciers on top of Mount Kenya, and it's been melting for a while. So it's something I'd love to also kind of reach to Deniz about some of the efforts that are being done on that end. Yes, that's the only glacier that we do have in Kenya. That's on top of the mountain, and much of it has melted. Climate change is a reality. It's everywhere. It's affecting every sector and every continent.
Maybe we can establish someone to join Taskforce from Kenya to.
In fact, what's of interest to me is now Deniz has a reason to fly to Kenya, climb Mount Kenya, pretty much establish the task force. So you're most welcome, Deniz.
Thank you, Felix. Of course, I would like to support any regional effort as well, but you are and anybody you think might be interested in this project are most welcome to join the overall task force about glacial resources conservation task force, because this is something we need everyone. Now we, as a few people, we can only focus around India, but then this will be the topic of everywhere. Like you mentioned, not only Switzerland or Alpine regions, but also Kenya or any region from maybe South America. So this is only about the people, and the people will be our guide in this task force to go focus those regions, because first we want to utilize the traditional and advanced methods to support the local communities dependent on glacial meltwater. And from there, of course, ecosystem role is another point of action that we want to circulate or convey this knowledge from one to another.
This is perfect. I have the group, and that's Mount Kenya Conservancy. So I'll do an email introduction for at least towards the agenda.
Awesome occasion. So this is what I love, not only about Rotary, but also this overall sharing, right? So it is everywhere. So as long as you are passionate, I think one way to another, you are communicating with people.
Yeah, exactly. It's always nice to meet inspiring people and talk to more inspiring people. Talking about inspiring people, during our talks before, you always said, I don't know how to do less. Can you share what drives you to maintain such high level of commitment and involvement in many of your projects? We spoke about few, but we need another hour or two just to speak about everything else that you do.
There is no certain recipe for that, I should say. It maybe lies behind knowing what you want to do or what makes you really excited about doing it. So when I read something or when I just came across to any information or information channel, if that makes me excited, I really go for it without thinking about. So this is maybe a takeaway for people who find some similarities about me in their habits. So I often go behind what calls or what my gut feeling pushes me for. And of course, by doing that, there is this background memory saying that, okay, you have less time for this, or you can really do this. This weekend is definitely time for doing that. But for a long-term projects, you have to see your overall schedule, because now I have a schedule in front of me, like my sleeping hours are really limited. So I shouldn't miss that much time in doing X, while I may have a chance to miss Y. So now it turned out in a way that I am so occupied with many activities, which makes me feel really happy, because they are mostly the activities that are related to environment. So I think my exit is my work, my life, everything is about what I'm doing and what I'm liking. So I try to pursue the environmental topics in my PhD, but also in my volunteering efforts. And by doing that, I don't want to say like, okay, this is important. This is so crucial that we have to do this. But for what? I mean, maybe yes, there's scientific fact, but also as a person, if I don't follow what I'm saying, I usually don't recommend to people. So for instance, there's a conference in Canada, and this is for real. That was in mid-June. And I have expedition to Canadian Arctic in following next week. So I asked to myself, in terms of individual carbon footprint, if you want to go to that conference in Canada mid-June, then you have to come back all the way, and then you have to go to Canada again all the way for your expedition. And imagine all these long haul flights that I am spending carbon around. So this is insane. And that was the topic, like point for personal awareness. Okay, do I want to really do this? Maybe we need to prioritize our any day-to-day activities or any aspect or step action we are taking. And that was the time I said to myself, no, Deniz, I mean, this is really something else. And instead, what are the other options? I really wanted to go to that conference because it's also important for my career. But I also find a chance that I can join virtually. And I did that. Because, I mean, this is something as a person, literacy, right? Environment literacy. So how can I minimize those efforts? Because then otherwise it would be kind of ironic. So most of the time I'm hearing that scientists are the people who are also spending a lot of carbon footprint behind them. Why? Because we go to field work, we try to pursue something, to conduct our surveys, collect data, but in the end of the day, you have the data, but as a, let's say, person, as a researcher who is focusing on permafrost costs, so this is something I have to also adjust my work life, my individual life according to that. What I try to say is we just need to be passionate about what we want to do. But by doing that, always need to question back to ourselves why I'm doing this, why this is important, what are the consequences. If you feel like, okay, this is still a lot, but I want to go, then go. But if you think this is too much on your plate, then you have to stop, then you just stop there.
How do you stay motivated and find balance while working on so many demanding environmental projects? What advice would you give to others looking to make an impact in climate action?
4 hours of sleep is not healthy, but it's good for the environment. That'd be an advice. I have so many meetings during the day that I sometimes forget to eat or to sleep. And I'm like, at some point in this Zoom session forever, which is good. But it at some point, I don't know how you, Felix, feel it like, but it does feel sometimes after having 11 meetings during the day that you kind of like, maybe I could just go to sleep. But then you realize there's so much still to do.
No, that's definitely often the case. I mean, you have your own tasks. Maybe you wrote down or you keep reminding yourself that I'm going to finish them today. But you also have your colleagues that end up in next to your desktop and saying that, oh, hey, we have this very urgent. So can you check it for us or focus on this? Or someone else just send you an email saying that, oh, sorry, we made a miscalculation. Actually, today the meeting will take place or whatsoever, and you couldn't follow what you want to do for that day. But I would say as long as you produce something or you do something to finish, no matter what is happening, it's still a day that we could call productive, right? Maybe you do less, I don't know, reading that you're supposed to do for that day, or maybe you did something else, but it doesn't have to be in the same way that we always wish for. What I try to say here is that as long as we thank to ourselves, I think it's valid. Because I'm also type of person that I learned later in the process, like I was really judging myself, like, oh my God, you still couldn't finish that. Still didn't do that. But I cooked something. I cleaned up. I don't know, finished the emails that I had to answer. Maybe it's not in the way that I had to do for that day, but it's still something that I am showing progress. So maybe we need to remind ourselves this. And if we come back to nature about it, it's the same. If we even put a little step forward, so it is still valid. And you shouldn't say that, oh, I still do not do a lot for environment. But well, you still try your best to go in that way. And as long as you know that your approach is the right one, then just go ahead. And for sleep, lack of sleep, these are all also related to mental health. So maybe for a day or so, you can say that, okay, I missed a few hours of sleep, but in the following days, if you keep having such a progress, of course, everybody has different sleeping orders, but if this is somewhat knocking your door saying that this is not correct to your body, then you need to change yourself. Otherwise, I mean, maybe lack of focus or anything else that can easily make us go down. And this is actually the biggest threat where especially we are trying to like meet with our own tasks in a very short deadlines, because then someday you just come and say that I don't want to do anything today. But how can you boost your energy then? Yeah, sleep and the other things are very important. But again, this is a diet, a personal diet that everybody needs to look for themselves.
I think that's really wise words to really finish our podcast today. Thank you for joining us, Deniz. Wish you well on your expedition next week.
Honestly speaking, I've learned a lot. Honestly speaking, I've been able to connect with her on so many levels. Herself being a busy person, herself having a passion in making the society a better place for all humanity. And also, basically, as you had, 3 hours of sleep is what basically has been my norm. And getting advice from her has been quite splendid because, as much as we are taking care of the environment, we also need to take care of ourselves. It is critical to also the continuum of human existence. So, thank you so much, Deniz. It's been an honor, it's been a joy, and I look forward to engaging further with you.
Thank you so much again for having me. It was an absolute pleasure to be part of ESRAG Podcast series. And I wish you all the best for this very innovative and also communication-based activity, which is really interesting to hear other stories from people. So thank you once again.
Felix, did you read something funny? Have you seen a funny animal? Did you experience something interesting?
The only funny thing I pretty much experienced is walking into the Kenya Space Center, which was like walking into the moon, and I had to do some moon walking. So basically, that was the funniest thing that happened to me this week. Other than that, nothing else has been, other than just the climate playing a little bit funny on me also.
One funny thing is I have some allergy to mosquitoes, so that's not really nice to have. But I was reading, and then there are millions of mosquitoes being released in Hawaii. Know that they are malaria-free mosquitoes. So don't worry, they're for the good cause. So there were a million mosquitoes released in Hawaii to save its rare honey creeper birds species. So before there were 33 honey creeper species being extinct. So they want to preserve the last 17. And these are very rare birds that they die right away after getting bitten by a mosquito with malaria. So they just have no immunity whatsoever to this disease. And now conservation people are trying to save this 17 species by releasing mosquitoes in Hawaii. So it's very innovative way to release a lot of mosquitoes, but it does frighten me. I cannot imagine being released 1 million mosquitoes. It's not really something that I try to imagine even in my sleep. But it shows that there are around the world still innovative ways to preserve, try to save species around the world. And if you look online, honey creeper in Hawaii, it's quite a cute bird. So if there are 17 species of them left, we must try to preserve as many as we can.
Well, for you, I'd say no more Hawaii for a little while.
Yeah, I can just go to Kenya. I think there are no mosquitoes in Kenya.
You're most welcome, sir. In fact, now you give me a reason to have a team to go up the mountain.
Are there no mosquitoes in the mountain?
We do have quite some, especially around Lake Victoria, but the mountain, I think you'll be fine. You'll be quite fine. You'll be comfortable. Better than Hawaii, that's for sure.
Okay, you convinced me. We'll go with Deniz together. We'll come together then. When she can, we'll just go, all three of us. On that note, I'd like to thank you, Felix, for co-hosting today.
It's been a pleasure, and it's been a while. So this was quite refreshing. And also to have Deniz on board. They say it's woman power, but I say it's also science power.
Science, woman power. I'd like to also thank our listeners. So stay tuned as we follow a lot of different projects around the world. Thank you for joining us at ESRAG Podcast. If you enjoyed today's podcast, be sure to subscribe and leave us a review. Share this episode with your friends, family, and spread the word around these innovative efforts to protect our planet. So until next time, keep making a positive impact. And remember, every small action counts towards a greener, healthier world. This was part of ESRAG Podcast. You can find more information on the website called esrag.org. And we'll hear you the next time. Thank you so much.